spent too long without creating something with meaning to me, so I decided to make this video as I recognize this is one of the largest issues, if not just the root cause of all the largest issues within the furry community. And I haven't seen anyone attempt to speak about it in depth, so I have taken it upon myself to do so. This is the degenerative furry cycle laid out chronologically in 5 stages, which start before the individual becomes a furry. Keep in mind as you watch this video that this all stems from isolation or trauma, or both, as that is a true issue that needs attention brought to it. Without understanding that, this video can only accomplish so much of its original goal. The purpose of this video is not to shame or tarnish anybody's reputation, but my own naive attempt at helping those who may have fallen victim to this cycle's fangs that want to escape but don't even understand how they got here in the first place. I tried my best to make this video easily digestible, and please excuse any mistakes or slip-ups, as this is my first time making a video like this. Now on to the video itself. We could start talking about the juicy stuff, like the process the young furry mind takes to end up becoming a degenerate waiting to be content farmed on VR chat or groomed in a Discord server. One of those two. Or it's not usually in a Discord server, it's usually in like a private Discord group chat or Telegram group chat. But it typically happens. It's a very big problem. Sexuality, more or less, has proven itself to be flexible based on personal circumstances. A straight man can be made gay if put in a desperate enough situation. This means a situation where the man or woman is cut off socially or at least very alienated, leading to this person seeking comfort online through communities because these communities are very accepting. This person uses the internet and its anonymity to paint a perfect picture of themselves, what they believe someone would want. However, when you aren't wanted, your idea of what would be wanted out of someone is skewed. This is the first stage in the process, and we're going to label it as desire. People in stage 1 are usually put into some situation which causes trauma in their childhood or, recently, which evolves into a desire to be wanted. Typical events that can lead to this are lack of father or mother, abuse from authority figures, being bullied in school, or an issue that they have developed all on their own, through isolation most likely. Whatever it is, it pushes them away from other people, away from societal standards, norms, and views. This essentially resets them socially, leaving room for reconstruction. This is around the time when the desire for another person becomes louder and louder. At this point is when they feel they must refine themselves for another person or group so they are wanted. This typically happens from the ages 12 to 15. To put into perspective how common this is, I brought up some statistics by Cigna. A survey in 2018 reported that nearly half of Americans report feeling alone, sometimes or always, and that 1 in 4 rarely or never felt understood. But just think about that. In 2018, pre-COVID, half of 20,000 people were feeling lonely. I can only imagine that number has risen now, but just puts into perspective how many people are truly suffering from this. This is where stage 2 starts, humble beginnings. At this point, the desire to be wanted has consumed the individual soul so much so that they're willing to reconstruct themselves entirely. This is when the person is truly changed. Due to isolation, these people find something to try and quell the lonely feeling. It is almost always the internet, if not always in 2025, due to its accessibility and personal customizability. These people usually end up finding some odd interest within themselves, like anthropomorphic animals. This happens because they discovered it in isolation somehow. The accepting attitude of these online groups as well is alluring to the lonely individual because we as humans are tribe animals and yearn for connection. This presents itself as exactly that, thus the process moves forward. Unfortunately, because of the raging hormones of a teenager, this heightened interest in these online communities devolves into something to do with pornography. They join a Discord server related to this online community. This process can apply to other online communities as well, but I'm focusing on furries in this video because obviously I have the most experience with them, considering I am one. Anyways, moving on to stage 3, the start of the end. This is when the isolated individual finally finds people like them, usually around the same age, with a few older people who in some cases act as the mentors of the group. All of these people bond so well because they're all coming from loneliness, the craving for attention, and raging hormones. The adults in the group typically have some form of guidance to the younger members, and you can see where that goes, but these people gather in a small server, usually open to the public, so they can find each other. This server becomes an echo chamber, of course, and it's dedicated to their group. It starts off friendly, then it devolves into sharing pornography in the more severe but hardly rare cases. When this happens to a young mind that has been reset socially and has the craving to be desired, it ruins them, because to them this group is their only real chance at being understood. So the sharing of pornography becomes normalized, which gives them an addiction to it, of course. And when a porn addiction happens, the lust of the feeling gets worse and worse over time. You need more of a kick, so it devolves even more. And the adults usually enable this because the same thing happened to them, so it's all they know. Faux solitude. At this stage, the individual may argue that their small group of heavily porn-addicted companions is a form of solitude, that they are happy they are alienated from most people in their lives. This is not solitude. This is an echo chamber that assists in efficiently devolving one's mind into a husk, only operating based on what provides the most dopamine. An echo chamber is essentially a group cut off from conflicting views and beliefs, and this group further enforces their own beliefs by circulating existing views while avoiding or outright attacking opposing views. People are going to say, well, it's just porn, they aren't hurting anyone, it's only drawn. And my counter argument to that is I have seen countless people become scum of the earth because porn caused them to stop seeing intimacy as something sacred instead of something that they need. This thought process leads to these people only really wanting to get close to people so they can get off. All this does is hurt innocent people who were not, quote unquote, informed that all the other person wanted was their body. It's a gross, vile, putrid way of thinking that has no reason for being around today, but it's always been around, so of course it would still be today. The only thing you can do as a sensible person is to avoid these people and call them out for what they are. More reasoning to my counter-argument is, there are plenty of studies on how dopamine works in the brain. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter which our brain fires between neurons when we engage in certain activities such as eating, drinking, or having sex. The brain releases dopamine when we engage in these activities because they are essential for survival and reproduction. Dopamine makes you feel pleasure and satisfaction. While reinforcing vital behaviors was dopamine's original function, it can be triggered by artificial stimuli, leading to potential addiction. It really doesn't take much reading to figure this out, and it's all over the internet. Sexual activity and arousal naturally trigger the release of dopamine, creating feelings of pleasure and reinforcing the behavior. Creating feelings of pleasure and reinforcing the behavior. You don't have to be a scientist to figure this out. Now look here. Pornography, however, takes this natural process and amplifies it to potentially harmful levels. Wow, what a shocker. It gives you the same amount of dopamine or more than that of a real sexual encounter. And oh, look at that. This is due to the novelty and variety of stimuli that pornography provides. These kind of stimuli are called supernormal stimuli, as stated in the paragraph directly after. Moving on. Here it says that the problem arises when it becomes a regular occurrence, or an addiction. Like any other addictive behavior, the brain can become desensitized to it over time and require more intense or frequent stimulation to achieve the same level of pleasure. This desensitization leads to escalation, which leads to them seeking out more personalized pornography, which leads to a lack of impulse control, so on and so forth. It doesn't say it outright in the article that porn addiction will lead to only seeking out partners for sexual gratification, of course. But when put in a community of people who are all in the same boat, it easily devolves into that. Thus, the idea of a relationship is completely ruined. Stage 4, True Change. Over an extended time period, these groups typically span out. Friends will meet friends of friends and whatnot. This, coupled with the overwhelming teenage desire for intimacy with someone and the idea of a relationship, becomes tarnished in their minds because of the constant exposure to illustrated pornography. Because you can draw anything you want, the pornography becomes more and more personalized. Eventually, the individual becomes attracted to the same sex because it provides more of a kick. This happens because of how normalized it is in these groups to be openly sexual and how accepting they are of the same sex attraction. Not just this, but these people most likely struggled socially, especially with women, so men are the next best thing in their eyes. So at this point, we have a group of usually men who are porn addicted, homosexual, with ages ranging from 12 to 24, and they all have the same thought process. They are loud about their lustful desires, their thoughts, so they all bond over it and get closer. Some get really close and end up getting into a relationship. They get into these relationships because of relatability or that the person is what they want. Someone who grew up without a father would naturally want someone who has the characteristics of a father figure, say taller and masculine, caring and strict. Combine this with sexual tension, and the idea of a relationship is ruined even further in their mind. But this is a norm to them at this point. The individual finds someone who fits their wants and desires, or someone who aspires to usually. However, to this individual, this person fits their wants and desires entirely. Stage 5, it's over. This is the end of the cycle. The individual has found their porn-addicted, lustful, non-standard relationship. The isolation experienced initially, then the finding of a group through the internet, then the reconstruction of the self for others all led to this point. The individual believes that they are ready to feel better. But to feel better to them is essentially just constant and immediate dopamine from another person through sexual pleasure or words. What makes this cycle so never-ending is the fact that this person's entire social life is filled with people in the same situation, so it is viewed as normal. They are all open about their relationships and issues because that is a norm to them, and with the constant dopamine, you need to do more and more to get that kick from it. Being open about your fantasies and private life gives that extra kick. To them, it's a brag or something to be happy about. This unhealthy, lust-filled social echo chamber typically collapses due to a few things. The relationship crumbles due to people cheating or simply getting tired of one another because they can no longer satiate their urges. Or sometimes people mature and realize how gross it is, so they despise people who represent such an idea. However, these people usually continue to go onto social media platforms and share their sexual desires openly, or their wants in another person. Then they find another group as an older individual, and the younger isolated people come in again like they did when they were younger. And because the older individual only knows the echo chambers that they grew up in through their teenage years up until this point, the cycle continues. They act as the mentor for the younger people and evolve their minds into dopamine-addicted porn addicts just like them. The cycle doesn't end, it is over. I believe this cycle is a good display of the stark contrast between being alone by circumstance compared to being alone by choice. Some solitude is good for the soul, while isolation is harmful to it. I personally believe that we should all have more time with our own thoughts because discovering yourself is an integral part of the human experience. Too many people use their perceived view of others as a guide on how to live. And rather than interacting with the intention of receiving or gaining something, we should be attempting to see how others see, as it would help unite us in truly beneficial ways. I believe that people should spend time alone, truly unpacking all that causes them grief and dismay within themselves. All in all, I see loneliness as something to become comfortable with, because when you can't stand even a day alone, you will do absolutely anything to get away from it. Thus the cycle begins.